What's up, my friends? How's everybody doing today? I know somebody's going to comment on the suit, so yes, I was digging through my closet, I found this suit in there, and I said, I'm going to wear this today. So I figured it'd be a perfect time to do my video that I've been putting off here about political correctness, or PC values, if you will. I've done a lot of thinking about this subject over the last couple of years, and I've changed my views and have a newfound understanding for people who are completely taken back and disgusted by the way that we are trying to interfere in the way that people talk because we're afraid of hearing what they have to say. But at the same time, many people have legitimate gripes about hate speech and hateful comments. Well, I'm going to try to do this in a reasonable amount of time. I'm not going to go on and on about it, but there's a lot to say about this current atmosphere. First off, you know, I'm going to do the video about this later, but I'm Gen X, okay? Now that doesn't really have much meaning. And people talk about generations as if, oh, whatever, it's just a group of people, it doesn't matter, there's no real generations, there's a variety of people within each generation. But the fact is, my group of people within the Gen X community are rather small. We grew up at a time when we were shifting away from people basically saying whatever they wanted, but still being correct in certain ways. And I'll get into that, but we were able to better hide our stereotypes, our judgments about one another because we lived in smaller communities and our environments were localized. Now that we're online, everything's open game and we can see what everyone else is saying and how people really feel. So a couple of years ago I thought, well, people are actually changing and having more respect for one another, and I think that being politically correct is a great way to move forward, but the term is so widely used that it really has lost its meaning. Nowadays, a person can't even say the word retard without being bombarded and attacked. And the more famous a person is, the more recognized they are, the more careful they have to stumble over their words. And it's one of those things that I understand that the intentions behind people standing up for others and saying, well, we don't want to say retarded. We want to say differently abled, which to me is just ridiculous because it has the same meaning. What we've done is we've assigned negativity to words rather than saying, well, the word itself is negative. We'll say, well, we believe it's negative because of what it carries. We're almost afraid of the words that we're using. But one of the main things is you cannot force PC values on people. This has been in the media a lot, especially with what happened, say, in Canada with Jordan Peterson and here in Washington State at Evergreen College with Brett Weinstein, actually. And, you know, the guy, he's a very intelligent professor. He is very well spoken. He's not a racist, a misogynist. But his class literally basically held him captive. And I'll put it this way. There's a day at Evergreen College which is supposed to be all black day. No white. They asked no white people to come to school that day. To me, I won't even get into how just ridiculous reverse discrimination this is, but he refused to stay home, and so did some of the others. So they were bombarded and harassed with this, as if they were the ones that were not politically correct, because, you know, they weren't allowing blacks to have their day. Now, if it was a white day, and they were told blacks not to come to school, it would be a huge issue. The thing is that, and this is a major important issue, we are afraid of the history that we have with, say, Native Americans, with blacks, you know, slavery in this country. So people tiptoe lightly around modern issues as if, well, I'm sorry that your ancestors suffered, therefore I have to tiptoe about what I say and be careful about what I say around you because, you know, your family has been held. It's a very complicated issue, and it's one that goes deep. And I definitely have empathy for those who have gone through hard times and for those whose families have suffered with discrimination through racism, classism. You know, I understand. I grew up poor. You know, so here's the thing. Someone will always be offended. There will always be somebody to be offended. So no matter what we do trying to eliminate words from the vernacular, all it's going to mean is that people are more offended by simpler words and less offensive terms. It's something that always happens. In other words, even if we got rid of, let's say, well, I don't want to make it go too far into metaphors here, but so one of the things is that we're afraid to talk to one another. We've always been afraid to talk to one another about the issues without calling each other these generalized names like snowflake or cuck, or on the other side, calling people racists or haters merely because they have different views. And one thing that we're forgetting is that accusing people of being a racist or a misogynist merely because they say, well, men and women are different in this way, let's say, or that, you know, this is how I feel about communities and their natural tendency to separate into their own groups, and no, you're a racist or you're a misogynist. Those words are painful. And, you know, we were raised to say, you know, words will never hurt me. Sticks and stones can break my bones. But the fact is, words do hurt. And we know that. And that's why the PC police are out in full force, because they think words hurt. So calling someone or generalizing someone because they hold a particular view when it may be inaccurate is just as harmful as the word that they may have used. I would like to be on the liberal side of things and say, wow, they're really approaching this well, that the millennial generation is actually doing a good job on this whole thing. But the thing is, if you look around and you ask people, if this isn't a liberal or conservative, left or right issue, everybody is sick of PC culture. Everyone is tired of the political correctness. If you dare speak up on it, then everyone will just say, well, you're a hater, or you're against change, or we're trying to move forward. The thing is, moving forward has to be done willfully. The individual has to choose to respect one another. It cannot be forced through any laws to do so. It will never work. Because human nature is to push back twice as hard when we're told not to do something. So, the college campuses have become the worst places for this. There is so much of this, this is, you know, the term snowflake, it doesn't do justice to, you know, some people who feel offended that another person wears a certain shirt, or that they are even speaking on campus. You know, the fact that, say, these liberal groups have blocked conservatives from speaking because they say, we don't want to hear what you have to say because it's hate speech. But at what point do we realize we're prohibiting speech, free speech? You can't tell if something is hate speech until you've heard it. And the thing is, humans are smart enough to know not to buy into it. And if they're not, then they're going to fall for something else anyway. We cannot shut down people for what they have to say. It's just not right. One of the biggest issues with this is that comedy gets stifled. And you can, if you look into Google comedians, PC culture, and see what it's actually done to many of the comedy acts, which are all in good nature. They help us understand differences about one another and bring each other together. Comedy has always been part of our society. And limiting that in any capacity, that means that there's not even a safe place to make jokes anymore. Then what we're turning into is just a bunch of, you know, stick-up-our-ass people that really don't have any, you know, that are afraid to say how we truly feel, you know. Basically, what we're doing is creating our own 1984, our own Orwellian culture, where instead of Big Brother watching us and telling us what we can and can't say, we're telling each other what we can and can't say. And that's a big problem. And history tells us we've always been this way. There have been times when we have been leaned towards one type of generalization or another, but that we've always kind of had this prejudice within us towards certain things and certain cultures and people, but that it doesn't always mean that we hate others, or that we're racist, or that we can't accept or tolerate or understand other people. Often it just means we recognize the differences within us. And this has even become bad with men and women. We can't even talk about the differences between men and women anymore without feminists going off the rails about it. So, like I said, once again, you try to stop people from speaking and they push back harder. And most people, I believe, have good intentions. There are very few people out there who are really just trying to split society up. But the ones who do have enough propaganda and enough people behind them and enough money to sponsor their points of view that people fall into line and listen to it. For all the PC culture about, you know, telling each other what to say, and then we have leadership that basically says whatever they want with no repercussions and nobody seems to care. Where basically it's a cognitive dissonance that we have as an entire society. We want to be better, but we're not sure which path to take to get there. And we often forget about the environmental factors within us that cause us to feel the way that we do, and how the internet has connected us so quickly that we're just starting to understand these things. I am more or less politically correct out of respect for people, but not because I feel like I'm forced to. But even as a YouTuber, many YouTubers had to change the way that they did things. I mean, for some people it was they stopped cussing in their videos because then they couldn't get advertising revenue. I don't have ads, so that doesn't matter. The reason I don't cuss is because I don't want to offend people. Maybe there's children in the room. When it comes to talking about, let's say, you know, religion or politics. The reason I don't bash, the views I don't agree with, it's not because I'm afraid of other people retaliating or disagreeing. Quite the contrary, and the opposite. It's because I want to understand other points of view so I can better understand my own points of view. Because to think that half the people understand what's going on and the other half are just complete douchebags is completely counterproductive to everything that we stand for as humans, or that we should stand for, which is a little bit more understanding, acceptance. You give me my space, I'll give you yours, that kind of thing. South Park did a great season about PC culture, and I don't recall if it was last year or the year before, but a new principal came to the school and he was PC principal. In the end, he revealed that he was like a frat boy and that PC was Pussy Crusher, and those boys, South Park creators put this together. It's Trey Parker and Matt Stone, I believe. They put them together very well, and they cover a lot of bases about what's going on. And the reason another point about this is that this year, the entire season of South Park has been more or less about resignation. Like, school shootings have become just a normal thing. We don't care about, this or that anymore. Everybody's become passive, complacent. And it's because we're afraid to say how we feel. Because a lot of the times people will, crush us for it. I'm glad that I can say what I feel. And I feel bad for those who are in positions where they are respected or recognized. They can't even speak the truth because they're bombarded with the PC police. Meanwhile, we've got idiots like Kanye West out here who is just revered and respected by all these people. And, from the person that I grew up as, and what my father taught me about being an adult and a responsible human, and what my mom taught me, and what I learned from my friends and family and from observation, is that you learn to sense a person's intention, but intention only goes so far if you don't learn how to behave and become an active member of your community without being an asshole. And there are a lot of them out there. And many times the reason why so many actors and musicians have these ridiculous attitudes is because some of them grew up and never really had to face adversity. They actually grew up as, spoiled people who don't understand. And in fact, I kind of like and hate Bill Maher at the same time. That's one of those things. But last night, my wife was watching this clip, and it was Barbara Streisand was being interviewed. And I'd never really listened to her talk, but her voice and just the way, her inflection in her tone and the way that she was like, I didn't realize this or this. And it was this, it was kind of the epitome of what's wrong with much of our culture. No offense to her or anybody who likes her, but that it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And many people who never had to suffer any real adversity in their lives, or be poor, or take soda cans back to buy food, that kind of stuff, they tend to be the ones who often will push the hardest towards telling others how to believe and what to believe and how to feel. In other words, some of these spoiled millennial college kids, these trustafarians who never had any real problems in their lives, they all of a sudden want to stand for something. And so they go out and they're protesting to protect every other group, every minority group. It's like the thing. And that's what PC police has become. That phrase is has become to define not just being truly correct, but telling others how to live their lives. So hopefully this video comes across as not combative or hateful towards being correct, but rather people understand my intention is to say we should all do this for the reasons in our hearts that we want to, not because we're told to, or because society tells us to. There is a certain degree of understanding and respect we have to have for the way society operates. In other words, no matter how independent, fiercely independent we might be in our brains, we know that the whole has a better picture than any individual. There are plenty of nutcase religious freaks out there who say that they are God, that if everyone believed everyone, then, we'd all fall for some BS. We kind of learn to weed out the nonsense from the truth, and we can't always know. But you can sense in the demeanor and inflection in a person's voice, the way they carry themselves, what they really stand for, or at least their intentions. And that's why body language is important, and as well as understanding that just because somebody says, talks about culture doesn't mean they're a racist. Just because somebody says, men and women have different strengths doesn't mean that they're a sexist, misogynist. And, I think that this The whole snowflake thing goes to both sides. I've seen so many just extreme people on both sides that are just so sensitive that if you even touch them, they just blah, 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 freak out. I mean, just look at some of the interviews with, you know, some of these protesters that make everyone look bad. Does it mean all protesters don't have a cause? No, it just means that the ones who speak the loudest often speak the loudest because they feel like they haven't been heard, because usually they have nothing to say. So, not always. I mean that with all respect. Those who stand up for others, it's an important part of our society. Just do it in a way where you can open up a discourse, because I feel like we're all falling apart. But I'd just like to say one last note, because I don't want to leave it on falling apart. I look at this like, when I said cognitive dissonance, when our brain, if you want to, there's no real left and right brain. It doesn't work the way that we're always told, that left is, you know, rational thought and right is creativity. But in general, different areas take on different stories or different jobs. But let's just say this: when we have two opposed viewpoints about something, we will wrestle with it in our mind, and we might believe one thing for a while, then we'll go to the other way, and then we'll go back and forth, and that's okay. It's important. Not everyone does this. Some people just stick with one thing and they're afraid to change. But bouncing ideas back and forth is what our society is doing as a whole. It's a metaphor for just what an individual does as we're processing ideas. You let everything go to the right, and then you let everything go to the left, everything go to the right, everything go to the left, and we're trying to find a balance, a happy medium, where everyone can be content. Because fucking A, life is short, it goes by faster as you get older, and by the time you realize what's going on, you say, I could have taken initiative. Why did I let everybody else tell me how to live my life? And why did I follow this path that was set as this standard for me? Anyhow, that's for another subject altogether. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a wonderful day. Please leave a comment. Thanks to all my supporters, all my subscribers. Thank you to my Patreon subscribers. I appreciate any donations are always wonderful, of course. And I'm going to get on to the next video because I got some other shit to talk about. Talk to you later.